Fast forward in time a few months to when the Riders Republic beta was a thing. I'm an extreme sports fan, but as soon as I loaded that thing up, in a word, I was alienated. In two words, it's an ostentatious alienation because of all the style, all the things that have been added to it, all the microtransactions. It was just too much. And before we get into this episode of Impossible Mission, please do click like and subscribe to keep up to date with all the things that the Geek Show does, including Gosu news of him on the left, or wherever he is on the screen, and Director's Uncut of me here. So yes, I'm Rob, and over there is Producer Rob, or Prob for short. Hello there.
Hello.
Yes, Impossible Mission. It's when we talk about video games in a way that might frustrate or annoy or even maybe piss people off. Third time of trying this episode. The vague umbrella concept is alienated by... You could either say modern or mainstream. I think it's really deleted as applicable, but yeah, alienated by modern mainstream gaming.
Yeah, I mean... it is our third attempt at this, and we kept the recording of the original one, which we'll probably post on Patreon as an exclusive, because that has facts and figures and all sorts of stuff in there, which, do inform this episode, but not really essential for this particular episode, because things have moved on since we did have that discussion originally.
Yeah, I mean, I opened it up talking about Riders Republic, and that was around the time when we originally recorded this, so I think that was September last year.
Yeah, whereas the current flavour of the internet is Elden Ring, which is another one of those get good type games.
Yes it is. That was the theme of the second one, which was kind of like if you ask somebody to record a video or a podcast when they're neck deep in flu madness. That's what the second one was.
Yeah. But, yeah, you did have your Lemsip head on, so...
Me?
Yeah, that wasn't me. I can't remember.
It was you. So, how... Because there's so many ways... I mean, the fact that we've done 3 takes on this essentially is testament to the fact that this is a conversation which can be broken up or retold or reframed in so many different ways. From story to microtransactions to directions of games to where the video game industry is going. Bring your own poison, frankly.
I mean, for me, story plays a key part, but I'm not going to dwell on that because I have commented on the whole lack of storyline in certain games compared to a wealth of story in other games. And there's a direct imbalance between East and West when it comes to story, which I'm not going to go into, right?
It's its own thing.
Yeah, that's a separate topic for another discussion. What I will say is I found a very interesting discussion when I went onto Google and I just typed in alienated by mainstream games. And there was a post from about 3 years ago on girl games on Reddit. And
there we're getting into an entirely separate issue.
Yeah,
again, it's another avenue for it to fracture off into.
Exactly, but it actually gave me an insight and a parallel to what both you and I have felt as older gamers. And it's weird how it parallels with that, because the person who put the post on Reddit was saying that, I mean, she likes specific types of games, and what she felt was that modern games don't apply to her, and if she doesn't play mainstream games like your Call of Duties and your FIFAs and stuff like that, then she's not classed as a gamer, even though most of her free time is spent playing video games.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the same scenario for us. To a degree.
Kinda. It's moved on since then, the touchstones for what the person would refer to as what the mainstream is, but... Yeah. So, which which tour do you want to dip in which pool first? Because
well, I think we started off with Riders Republic, so let's actually go back to that first.
Okay.
Because Riders Republic displays a very specific thing that both you and I found weird and strange, and just it didn't fit.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
You have to be more specific. I can't talk in.
Okay, let me put it this way. My current game, the game that I've been playing the most for the last several months, is Forza Horizon 5. Yeah, and in Forza Horizon 5, you basically drive around. You have loads of agency in how you want to play the game, which I love. But on the side of that, you can have conversations with other players. You can basically dress your character up however you want. You can dress them up as a piñata or as a chicken or as whatever else, right? Which is a lot of what I saw in Riders Republic, and for me, I found it very garish and strange, all these weird and wild costumes. And I'm a person who plays Final Fantasy XIV, so I'm used to seeing characters dressing up as all sorts, right?
Yeah, but that's within like the world of fantasy, so it all makes like a relative amount of sense.
Exactly, but when you see a giant chicken riding a bike fast downhill, that's a different thing entirely.
There's other bits to that as well, like the giant horse head thing, and
yeah.
What I think about this is there's games which are funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether I'd class Monkey Island funny anymore. It's too much of its time, which is sort of late 80s, early 90s. I don't think that's really aged particularly gracefully.
I think it's humour that would make you smile from nostalgia more than make you laugh now.
Well, maybe if you were around at the time, yes. Yeah. But if you weren't, it's just kind of, what is this alien weird thing?
Yeah.
But my point is, there's funny games out there, whether they age gracefully or not. But it seems like the internet has infected a lot of things.
Yeah.
And the internet of choice has one sense of humour.
Yeah.
Let's word that. That sentence doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean.
It's meme humour, yeah.
And meme humour has infected games. And it's not a matter of an old man shouting at cloud because he doesn't get meme humour. And meme humour is meant to be disposable. It's meant to be throwaway. It's meant to be pick the purpose occurs. So let's just throw some mad little image with a all-purpose thing that you can change for whatever the purpose might be. If you get me.
Yeah.
Like that one with the girlfriend and the guy looking over his shoulder. That one's being used for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
It's bring your own reason, basically.
Yeah.
So my point is, games are out of touch, and it's kind of alienating in that way. Because it's using a meme-ish sense of humour, but meme-ish sense of humours move so quick that, you know, it's like doing satire of a newspaper a week after the newspaper's been printed.
Yeah.
Because, does that make sense as sort of a metaphor?
Oh, God, yes.
Because meme humour's zooming off into the future, and it's impossible for video games to keep up, so the kind of... And I think that's what Guacamelee did really well. Is like I think it was Guacamelee 2 or Guacamelee 1, I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was like a secret hidden level where you could go about dank memes from 2010, and it was like it's just taking the mick out of this sense of humour, which was very much past its prime, basically.
Yeah. I mean,
games like I'd throw Sunset Overdrive in there too. Sunset Overdrive, Riders Republic, Forza for some bizarre reason.
I mean, Forza to a lesser degree.
But it's targeting this sense of humour at an audience that doesn't want it.
Well, this is the
see what I mean? It's got like this warped image. It thinks it is this one thing, but the people who are after that one thing don't care.
Well,
I'm wording it in a really it's complicated to word. But,
I will play devil's advocate for Forza Horizon 5 and 4 because the main core of the game isn't that. That plays a very, very peripheral part to the game, the whole costume thing and everything like that. And the whole, all the emotes and the dances and everything, they're a very peripheral part to the game. The main core of the game is still, you get in a car and you go driving around or racing, whatever you want to do. That's it.
Yeah, I think the word a more simplified way is the video game industry thinks it's one thing, but the people who play it realise it's something completely separate and different.
Yeah.
And those two images don't really work together. I mean, I worded it in a really complicated way where I confused myself and my grammar just went out the window. But that's the basic truth of it. The video game industry believes it's one thing.
Yeah.
And people playing it think it's something completely different. And those two images don't really work with each other. So the result is the people who don't fit in get left out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a perfect summation of that particular aspect of it. And
I don't actually mean that in humour. I mean that across the board. But yeah.
I mean, what you have is a lot of suits, let's say, a lot of people who look at the financial side of things, and they look at the internet and they say, okay, right, this is really popular on the internet. This is what's going to appeal to this particular target audience, because you see a lot of people making comments about this particular thing. Instead of thinking, okay, our developers have a particular vision that they want to put into their game, let's leave them to it.
Yeah, and it dates these things horribly.
Yeah.
I mean, play Riders Republic in 3 years and it'll just be like your uncool uncle trying to... You know, that meme, again, going back to the meme where Steve Buscemi says, hello, fellow kids.
Yeah.
He's like got a skateboard.
I mean, even from The Simpsons.
I don't know what it was from. It was a live action. It's a real thing.
Was it?
Real Steve Buscemi. But yeah, that's what these games feel like now. So, hello, fellow kids. It's like, wow,
do you remember?
No.
Do you remember? I made the comment once that video games are going through a bit of a midlife crisis. So they're wearing the tropical shirts and they're basically thinking that they're driving the fast cars and thinking that they're kids again. Or they're somehow recaptured.
Yeah, this isn't a tropical shirt, by the way. It's black and white. It can't be tropical.
But that's literally how it's felt for the last 5 to 10 years of video games. That you have a bunch of middle-aged developers who are working for these bigger studios and publishers, and they're trying to recapture how games were when they were younger, and looking at the internet for inspiration, which is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to do. Don't look to the internet for inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
that's not going to lead you the right way.
That conversation... That conversation can go so many different ways.
Yeah.
Have so many different ramifications. Yeah. I mean, let's just sort of push out from that the whole idea of what the video game industry thinks and what people want are two different things.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of survival horror.
Yeah.
Very big fan of survival horror.
I'm the same. I do like it.
And single-player story games. And effectively, I think... it's kind of been this constant running dialogue how the big industry thinks that survival horror games don't sell, so they don't make them. And if they don't make them, how can they sell? So it's kind of like this. They're making this argument, but they're pushing the industry in a way which makes it true, rather than, if you see what I mean, it's...
I actually can give you a perfect example of what you've just said, right?
And these things don't happen, so we don't make them. And if they don't happen, they don't make them, how can they be successful? So it's just like this forever running cycle of...
There is already a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect example. Resident Evil 6.
Yes.
It is, isn't it? It's exactly what you're talking about. Resident Evil 1, 2, perfectly fine. The original ones, that is. Resident Evil 3 came out when Code Veronica was better. We all agree with that. Resident Evil 3, though... Yeah, dated badly, but Resident Evil 3, though, wasn't a bad game on its own right. Okay? And then you had all the other spin-offs, Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and 2, and Resident Evil Survivor, and all the other stuff. And then you got to Resident Evil 4, which kind of reinvigorated the franchise, and you had the over-the-shoulder camera, and you had Leon as the main character, and it looked to be going in the right direction again. And then you had Resident Evil 5, and then you had Resident Evil 6, where they went, hey, let's make it an action game.
Well, Resident Evil 5 was like that too. It's like, this co-op thing's popular.
Yeah.
We better react to what the internet wants and make it like a co-op game. And the internet's like, and the game's like, no, it's Resident Evil. What you doing?
Yeah, and Resident Evil 6 was, that Call of Duty Zombies was popular.
Yeah. It's... And the fandom gets absolutely alienated. I mean, they want something, and the mainstream industry just refuses to provide it. Instead, it's pushing itself more and more. I mean, the current trend of like mainstream gaming is everything has to be online, everything has to be a live service, everything has to have microtransactions, everything has to have this plan of action for like multiple years down the line. And that's like everything from, I don't know, Riders Republic to Halo.
Well, I mean, Square Enix keep failing at the live service.
Yeah,
Babylon's fail.
Yeah.
Let's just call it that.
That's the current trend.
Yeah,
and
NFTs are the other thing as well.
Well, they're kind of fading out because the backlash has been beyond real.
The ridiculous thing about the whole NFT thing is that there are still people who want to use them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, at this point, those who really, really champion NFTs sound like cultists.
Exactly.
Like, properly died.
And there is no quicker way to alienate your audience or your fans of your games than to talk about NFTs, because as soon as you start talking, everyone's just like, nope, not interested.
Look at like Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo is old as the hills. And this is kind of like the perfect summary of what I was saying there too. Gran Turismo. All you need is cars, tracks. That's it.
Yes.
Make the races and gameplay good. That's all it needs.
I'm the racing game guy. I play racing games. That's the majority of what I play.
Somehow, some warped process somewhere, either at Sony or at Polyphony or Digital, so I thought, I know. Let's make it microtransaction heavy, and then change the rate of payouts for credit points. So every car is effectively. I mean, there was a document that went out how much it takes to get a certain car going from Gran Turismo 1, to Gran Turismo 7. And I think it started at about 8 races, and now it's about 315 for the same car.
Oh, God, yes.
Because it wants you to buy these things, and it's been absolutely review-bombed on these platforms like Metacritic.
And yet they stand around going...
It's a classic example of the video game wants this, and gamers like, behave.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, they stand around going, well, we don't know why this is happening. Why aren't we as popular as Forza Horizon 5 or something like that? Why can't we compete? And you're like, well, it's kind of obvious. You made the wrong decision here.
Yeah.
In Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, all of the fans of Star Wars games were looking forward to Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, the remakes of those games. And then just the loot boxes. And the next thing you know, I mean, the core games were great. Just the loot boxes, no one wanted to play the games.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it comes down to two things, this entire conversation. Video game industry not knowing what people want and not doing the research, and the video game industry trying to keep up with cool despite being 3 or 4 years behind what actually cool is. Yeah.
Do you know the weird thing is that there's been... you had some of the older game developers, some of the old school game developers. You had Gabe Newell stepping forward and commenting on the whole idea of the metaverse, NFT, stuff like that. And you had, what's his name?
Don't know.
Is the guy who was one of the developers of Deus Ex and System Shock?
Warren Spector.
Warren Spector, that's it. You had him stepping forward, making a comment on NFTs. And then you had Sid Meier, one of the most legendary game developers in history, saying, hey, cut all the bullshit, forget about all of this NFT, microtransaction, loot box, whatever bullshit there is, just make the game good, make the gameplay good, and then your game will sell. That's all that people want. Gamers are very simple. This is literally all they require is you to make a good game.
Yeah, I mean, NFT, gaming isn't a pyramid scheme. Stop trying to make it a pyramid scheme. People just want gamers and to be able to access their games without forking out constantly.
Exactly. You know,
I think Fortnite gets away with it because the game is free.
Yeah.
And that's the core thing. These people want Fortnite success and monetization, but they still want you to pay for a 70 quid game.
Babylon's Fall is the prime example of that. I know it's called Babylon's Fall, but...
And there's avarice, which is, I must have all of the money. Give me all of the money. Now.
In Babylon's Fall and in Avengers, you had to pay full price for the game, and then within the game, you had massively overpriced DLC that they expected you to buy just to finish the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like one aspect of this conversation about being alienated by the mainstream. But again, it's the last point I want to make. It's just about critical consensus.
Yeah.
Specifically around two games. One is Elden Ring.
Yeah.
And two is The Last of Us Part 2. But I want to focus more on Elden Ring because that's more of the contemporary thing that is happening right now. Let's be honest. It's kind of become a weird state of play, really. How once upon a time review scores were just, completely different and didn't make a slightest bit of difference. It was kind of like a validation. You wanted to buy it, checked out if it was good, review, sort of backed that up. But now it's become such a little cottage industry, the review industry, that it seems that if you get a good score, that is all the marketing you really need to do. Because it's elevated a game, which is a niche game. Let's be absolutely honest. Elden Ring is 100% a niche game for a niche audience. It's a fantasy game with a high difficulty level, and it's got gameplay systems that you really need to be invested in to play.
Yeah.
And it's sold 12 million copies. But the untold story of that 12 million copies is I don't think that's going to be 12 million copies of 12 million people playing it constantly. That's going to be about, 6 or 7 million that are traded in because people don't know what they're doing and they don't know how to play it.
Well,
because it's being elevated to somewhere it doesn't belong, and the mainstream is alienating the players who... sort of fractured a conversation there, but
No, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I was watching a Final Fantasy 14 streamer called Zeppler, and this was a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and she had attempted to play Elden Ring, right? And she played it for about 20 minutes and then quit the game and went back to look for an easy mode on the game.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's the get good thinking.
This is somebody who video game streams as her profession, saying, I want an easy mode in this game, right? And that to me is just the weirdest thing, because you have this Elden Ring game, which in terms of game world, in terms of game design, in the actual design of the world, the design of the characters, the design of the monsters, brilliant. I've not got a bad thing to say about it, But in terms of the mentality behind the game, it is a very, very challenging game in the same way that Dark Souls and Demon Souls and all the other games that From Software does in that vein, the Souls-like games, they've all been the same sort of thing. Now, I understand there's all sorts of world building in there that you can discover for yourself, and there's a lot of agency in the game. And if I had to give a parallel to Elden Ring, I would say something like a game where you discover your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's not. It's 100% not a game for everybody, and it's 100% not a game that should be on that top tier, that one must-buy game for everybody.
The game that I was going to parallel it with was No Man's Sky, which again is not a mainstream game.
No, it's not.
And I know that No Man's Sky has a lot of content now because the developers have basically dug deep and released a load of stuff for free, made the game really good, but it's still a niche game. And no matter how much you try and turn it into a mainstream game, it isn't.
Yeah, I think the problem with the video game industry here is it's still too centralised.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you look at movies, and a mainstream movie means so many different things.
Yeah.
Where a mainstream movie for me is, Scream. But a mainstream movie for somebody else is the new Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And the mainstream movie for another person, is a new Oscar movie. I think an Oscar-nominated movie. Those three things can be completely independent, and they all mean the same thing. They're all three are mainstream movies. Whereas in the video game industry, a mainstream movie, in the game industry, sorry, tripping on my tongue there. In the game industry, a mainstream game is one thing.
Yeah. There's
no gradation there. It's just one thing. One thing captures all. And the gaming industry isn't that narrow anymore. Everybody's a gamer. It's got to sort of tailor itself to this change of industry, this change of consumer, and it just hasn't happened.
Well, I mean, it kind of harks into a future conversation that we're going to have, which is kind of the other side of the mainstream viewpoint, which has to do with more to do with the actual community of video games. Which, if you listen to the discussion that we had, our original discussion, which, as I said, will be a Patreon exclusive, that will kind of highlight what we're going to be talking about when we come back to this topic.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm not going to dwell on it here because that is an interesting one for us to cover.
But there are the two things, really, 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
The gaming industry being out of touch with gamers, effectively. Yeah. And, yeah, it's the mainstream sort of being very narrow, when in fact gamers are quite wide.
Well, yeah.
Not in the sense of being fat. I mean,
what are you trying to say?
What are you trying to say? It's an industry of very wide people and interests.
An industry of very wide people. What are you trying to say?
No, I'm not even going to rise to that. But yeah, it's so many different. A mainstream gamer is so many different things. That's what
God, yeah. I mean, there's no set thing that defines a mainstream gamer, and that's part of what led us on to the second half of the discussion, was because it was because we realized that what a lot of people perceive as mainstream gamers are the people who stream video games and the people who talk about video games and the ones who are popular. And people think that mainstream games are the ones that they play.
Yeah, they're not. They're not.
You know? And they're clearly not that, because mainstream games, the biggest game in the world is Minecraft.
Yeah, always will be.
You know,
there's games that have sold more, but they've sold more as franchises, as collections of games. But as a single, pure one-off game, Minecraft is millions and millions and millions above anybody else.
And the thing is, you have people who basically stream them playing Minecraft and building stuff in Minecraft, and they get millions of views on YouTube and loads of people following on video game streams. But do you hear about those people in the mainstream video games press? No.
Nah.
Because that's a very niche audience that most video games press don't want to cover.
Here's the thing which I think a lot of people overlook. The video game press is kind of hardcore.
Yeah.
You've got to be really deep into video games to pay a slight bit of attention to the video game press.
Oh, God,
and video game news, and the minority watch these states of play, these live streams about new games releases. Most people don't care. Most people go to the shop and see what's new, and if they see something which has like preferential treatment in the storefront, like Elden Ring does, there's no gradation. It's just this one thing, this one absolute thing. They think, oh, that looks cool, I'll get that. They get it home, say, what the hell is this? I don't know what any of this is. It's too hard. Where's easy mode?
Yeah,
and people end up getting alienated by it.
I mean, you did.
There's so many other different ways this conversation can go, but on that avenue, that is absolutely what will happen.
Yeah. I mean, you did mention The Last of Us 2, which I think we can end on.
That's a more story-driven thing.
Yeah.
Where the video game press, to go back to them, they champion this thing as an intellectual story that really talks about how deep and interesting revenge is. But if you compare it to a movie which is telling a similar story, the movie version of The Last of Us is basically an exploitation movie from the 1970s. It's got the same amount of sort of intellectualism and thought-provoking nature as an exploitation movie from the 1970s.
Yeah.
It's not a smart game.
That was the thing that annoyed me the most about The Last of Us 2, was that it was trying to cram 2 games into one game.
Yeah, that too.
You know, and they were both revenge stories. And it was trying to... the whole thing was trying to make you sympathise and empathise with Ellie and Joel. And well, hang on, okay, yeah, fine. I empathise a little bit with Ellie, but I don't empathise with Joel at all, because the guy's an absolute monster. He took away the actual survival of humanity.
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, a maniac. There's loads of movies, horror movies especially, which you look and follow the horror, the bad guy.
Yeah.
And they're exploitation movies.
Exactly.
From the 70s and 80s.
Exactly.
Things have moved on since then, but video games, no. That's like high art, apparently, for video games, and you play it and you think, this is stupid.
Yeah.
What are people talking about?
Not only that, this whole idea that that Ellie is... I mean, I didn't like the hand-holdy aspect of The Last of Us 2, where it was basically leading me around saying, you must have this revenge. And I was like, but I don't want to. Mm-hmm. You know, if you've got control of Ellie, you're like, hang on, you've basically got a good life here, got a kid, got a girlfriend, you know, chill, relax. This is good. I've got a good life now. Don't want to give that up. Yeah. Just for some so-called revenge.
Yeah, the guy who she didn't even like anymore.
Yeah, exactly. What's that all about? Do you see what I mean?
There's so many different ways this conversation about alienating games can go. It's frankly staggering. You could probably do about another 5 episodes on this, being absolutely honest about it.
Yeah, I mean, Abby, I could understand Abby going hell for leather for revenge because of everything that happened. I could understand from her perspective, but Ellie had no reason to go for revenge.
So, on the 3 points that we made, is there anything you want to sort of throw out there before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I mean, just as a final bit, I think that they need to start thinking about what gamers or what people who play video games, not gamers. I'm not going to define it as gamers because I think that is a term that no longer applies. I think the whole idea of someone being a gamer is irrelevant. It should be put into the same category as somebody who watches movies. Everybody watches movies. Yeah, there is no such thing as a gamer. No. You are not a gamer. You're just a normal person who plays video games. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, gamer was a hangover from the time when it was you were socially ostracized for playing a game. It was an outsider thing.
From the time when I was a kid and we used to get the crap kicked out of us for playing video games. Modern gamers do not understand the actual levels of bullying and abuse that we as kids who played video games went through. Yeah, and I can guarantee that modern people who play video games probably wouldn't be able to withstand that.
Oh, no.
So yeah,
that's a bit of a heavy thing to end on. But
no, I'm just gonna drop that bombshell onto people because I want them to understand there was a lot of crap associated with video games right from the very beginning. You know, there was a lot of burden. There's a lot of baggage to video games history, and that's why I don't like the term gamer, because we were just people who played games, and I think that is the core thing now. But what studios and publishers are doing, they're focusing so much on the idea of the gamer being their mainstream audience when it's not.
Absolute thing, yeah.
Yes.
The gamer is this absolute known quantity.
Exactly.
It doesn't exist anymore.
And it's like FIFA, right? FIFA, loads of people play FIFA. FIFA, when it comes out, is one of the most popular games when it comes out.
It's like a top-selling game pretty much for about one of the top-selling games, like 40 of the 52 weeks of the year.
Yeah. I mean, how many millions of copies does FIFA sell?
Beyond millions, yeah.
I mean, Elden Ring selling 12 million pales in comparison to how much FIFA sells.
Yeah, I think that's about a quarter, or like 2 or 3 months.
Exactly.
Sales for a FIFA game across all platforms.
And that is, you know, it's a ridiculous amount. Call of Duty used to sell the same thing. Used to do the same thing, sell millions of copies of it.
Yeah.
There was that, what was that Square Enix game where they sold like 7 or 8 million copies and still called it a failure? Do you remember that article from a few years ago?
I remember it. I know Resident Evil did that when one of them sold 4 million and they said that was an abject failure. And I thought 4 million copies
of a survival horror game.
Yeah, and there was, I don't know what the Square Enix one was. It's not really coming to mind. Was it Tomb Raider?
No, I think it was I think it was Final Fantasy 13. I think it was one of the Final Fantasy 13 games.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean there was that whole thing with them. And that, to me, is indicative of just the mentality they're aiming at the particular audience that doesn't actually exist, that never existed, and is basically just a fallacy. It's a dream.
Yeah. I just want to say this, it's kind of like a continuation, my final point is a continuation of what I said in the last episode. The video game has gone corporate.
Yeah.
And when the video game industry goes corporate, it creates monsters like Bobby Kotick.
Yeah.
And Bobby Kotick doesn't care about the video game industry, he just cares about money in his pocket. And that is what the video game industry has become. It's become about a few people at the top and the profit that they get. It doesn't matter about all the little grades and all the little things underneath it, just as long as they get their profit and their pocket money and their money in the pocket.
Do you know, it strikes me, right, as a weird parallel. Do you remember...
Bobby Kotick is a perfect stop.
Yeah. Do you remember when Hollywood was going through kind of the 1950s and 60s and it was making all those studio movies?
Mm-hmm.
It was making all those movies just because they could, but they weren't aimed at a particular audience. They were basically what the studios thought people wanted.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, it feels like we've entered that phase in video games. You have a bunch of people making games that they think people want, but what most people want is Candy Crush or something like that.
I wouldn't say Candy Crush, but yeah, I'll meet you in that one. You
know, something that's easy to pick up and play and they can just basically while away a little bit of time with it and then move on to something else.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we haven't factored in, and I do want to, this is final nail in the coffin. We don't need to dwell on it, but because we've talked about it in other things and we will talk about that again, talk about this again, but the price of video games.
It's economies of scale, isn't it? You sell more at a lower price.
Yeah.
You sell less at a higher price. It's basic business, like, ideas and concepts.
But when you're charging £70 for a modern game...
Yeah, I don't doubt games cost more. I don't doubt it at all. But at the same time, you'll sell less.
Yeah, I mean, £70 for a game is a ridiculous amount of money.
And just to throw an out to our Australian buddies, $120.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And the tricks that companies will go to try and make sure you pay that. Sony's attempt, for example, when they hid the actual PS4 version with the free upgrade behind loads of menus and stuff, so you couldn't find it straight away, and put on their front page for that game the £70 version of the game.
Yeah. So I think this one could really, like I said, it's like 5 different iterations of this episode with 5 different collections of ways that the video game industry is alienating to everybody, not just us. So we'd like to know what you think, what we talked about, or maybe something that we didn't talk about that really, ground your gears into, fine coffee. Comment below. We'd like to hear from you.
Absolutely.
But, you can find Rob. I think he does 2 a week of Gosu News, where he does some fine cuts, some prime slabs of beef from the world of video game news, and he discusses them. And
it's one a week at the moment.
Okay, 1 a week. I beg your pardon. And I have Directors Uncut, a podcast in which we have a huge list of directors from all over moviedom. Use a random number generator, pick one of those directors at random, and talk about 2 of their movies, so you can find out wherever podcasts greet you. But yeah, that's us for this episode of Impossible Mission. Thank you very, very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Or if we've really annoyed you, just thanks anyway.
If we've annoyed you, we've done our job.
Yes.